human species has existed for more than 50,000 years. In comparison, the record of human history, from the ancient cities of Mesopotamia to our own computer age, is brief, a mere 7,000 years. But for as long as we've been able to trace the story of human beings, wherever they left a sign of their habitation on the earth, we find sacred places, tombs and temples, symbols and shrines, all evidence that humanity has always searched for meaning beyond the realm of the senses, beyond the daily struggle to survive. This is a story of 6 sacred wonders, 6 places that testify to the power of the human spirit. Of undeciphered meaning are found throughout the British Isles. But of all the prehistoric sites in the world, the most famous and mysterious is Stonehenge. For centuries, Stonehenge has been the subject of myths and legends, folktales and fears. In medieval folklore, Stonehenge was said to be the work of the wizard Merlin. It wasn't until early in the 17th century that folklore gave way to serious investigation. Various experts were appointed to study this megalith. Various conclusions were drawn. Stonehenge was a Roman temple. Stonehenge was a coronation site built by Danish invaders. Finally, in 1740, the scholar John Aubrey, perhaps England's first true archaeologist, concluded that Stonehenge was a temple of the Druids, a powerful Celtic religious sect that held sway over England 5 centuries before Christ. Though subsequent archaeological discoveries have disproven Aubrey's theory, modern-day Druids still lay a spiritual claim to Stonehenge.
To protect us. Hail to thee, O Sun, resplendent in full power. Hail to thee, O Sun.
Those people who call themselves Druids basically worship out in the open air, where they're in touch with the land, nature, and the sky and stars if it's at night, or the sun if it's during the day, and believe that God or the divine manifests in nature.
Hail to thee, O earth, the womb of all life.
Stonehenge, to me personally, is a temple, a place where I can go and give thanks to God, to the goddess, whatever you call the thing that gives us life.
O earth. And now, to close our circle,
Stonehenge may indeed have been used as a temple by Druids or Romans or other people whose identity is now lost to history, but they were not its creators. Modern research has established an astonishing fact. Stonehenge predates these cultures. We now know that Stonehenge was built in phases, beginning perhaps as early as 3500 BC and ending sometime around 1100 BC. The builders lived in an agrarian society and were therefore at the mercy of the forces of nature. Sun and rain and the changes of season probably dictated the rhythms of their lives. There is no evidence of an advanced civilization, or even of a centralized government or authority. Rather, Stonehenge appears to have been a remarkable cooperative project, an effort by primitive communities of Stone Age and Bronze Age peoples that spanned not just generations, but thousands of years. What knowledge, beliefs, or fears led these prehistoric people to pool their resources to build such a monument? The megalith was built before the invention of devices such as the pulley or even the wheel. For their excavations, the builders had only crude tools. To move the stones, they had only log rollers and ropes woven from animal hair. And yet, in one phase of the building of Stonehenge, the raw materials, called bluestones, some weighing as much as 8,000 pounds, were brought to the site from the Preseli Mountains in Wales, almost 250 miles away. It is estimated that it may have taken 100 years and the combined labor of thousands of people to accomplish the task. Stonehenge was an almost unbelievable feat of prehistoric engineering. In the final phase of the building of Stonehenge, massive sandstone blocks, called sarcens, were selected from a site about 20 miles to the north. Some of the sarcens weighed as much as 90,000 pounds. Once at the site, the sarcens were shaped and smoothed using hammerstones. Pegs, or mortises, were carved on the top of uprights to fit carved indentations in the lintels, the horizontal stones. These would form a continuous cap or ring on top of the upright pillars. After the stones had been properly shaped and tapered, a foundation pit was dug for each upright. The pillar was then rolled into position over the pit and levered into place. Then, supported by timber packing, the upright was raised a few inches at a time. When it was in the desired vertical alignment, the base was packed with stones and chalky soil. Then the horizontal lintels were raised inch by inch, using levers and massive wooden scaffoldings. After the outer circle of stones had been erected, massive trilithons were built, using the largest of the sarcens. Trilithons are two upright pillars capped by a lintel. 5 trilithons were placed in a horseshoe pattern inside the circle. The placement of various outlying stones has fueled considerable modern speculation. Was Stonehenge some kind of massive solar calendar or astronomical model? Stonehenge may have been created to measure the solar year in order to identify the most auspicious time for planting and harvesting, or even to predict eclipses of the sun and moon. But as with all theories about Stonehenge, there is evidence, but not proof. Indeed, throughout its existence, Stonehenge may have served many purposes: religious and political, scientific and magical. But the beauty and the power of Stonehenge lie in its mysteries. than 2,000 years ago, geographers in ancient Greece catalogued the 7 wonders of the world. All of these ancient wonders have long since vanished from the earth, all except one, the very oldest. Through a darkened corridor into the past, a path leads to the funeral chamber of a god king. Surrounded by 2 million blocks of granite and limestone, some weighing 7 tons, the chamber was meant to be the impregnable resting place of the pharaoh Khufu, ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, and the incarnation of the gods Horus and Osiris. This is his tomb. The pyramids at Giza. On a desert plateau some 25 miles west of Cairo stand the largest tombs ever built, the final resting places of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura, father, son, and grandson. River Nile. Its life-sustaining waters gave rise to the civilization that made the pyramids possible. Before the beginning of recorded history, in an otherwise barren desert, nomadic peoples cultivated the land on the river's banks. Annual floods fertilized their fields with rich silt from the riverbed. Over time, elaborate irrigation systems were devised to bring water to fields far from the river. A society with a centralized government began to form, a hierarchy of kings, courtiers, officials, and scholars that oversaw the rise of a civilization with both the knowledge and imagination to create wonders unlike any the world had ever seen. The pyramids stand on the boundary between unrecorded and recorded history. Around the time they were built, between approximately 2700 and 2550 BC, the earliest record of civilization begins. Pictures of the lives and beliefs of an ancient people. The ancient Egyptians believed in immortality. They thought their civilization would last forever. On the walls of tombs and funerary temples, the images of life after death. An afterlife that was believed to be much like life on earth, only somewhat grander and more comfortable. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh, or king, was seen as the son of a god, and as such, received the ka, depicted in this hieroglyph of outstretched hands. Ka was the soul, or life force, that passed from the gods through the pharaoh to his people. Thus the pharaoh was worshipped both in life and in death, as the source of immortality. When the pharaoh died, it was believed that he became a god, with special powers to influence the destiny of the living. The pyramids were built both to preserve the body of the pharaoh, which was mummified to last throughout eternity, and to preserve his ka. The pyramids were the central structures in larger funerary complexes that included temples where the living could worship and make offerings to statues of the dead god kings. The most famous and most mysterious of those statues is the Great Sphinx. With the head of a king and the body of a lion, its meaning has both fascinated and eluded scholars for thousands of years. Carved from a single block of stone, the man-beast gazes enigmatically, as though guarding the secrets of the ancient desert. The size of the pyramids is so overwhelming that they dwarf even the greatest cathedrals of Europe. Each side of the Great Pyramid is longer than 7 football fields. Its base covers more than 13 acres, and it rises higher than a 40-story skyscraper. Many have believed that the pyramids could not be the works of mere mortals, equipped only with crude tools. Rather, so some say, the gods themselves, or even visitors from another planet, must have had a hand in their creation. It is only the modern era that has produced a plausible explanation for how this astonishing feat of engineering and construction could have been accomplished. First, a site was chosen that had bedrock solid enough to support the tremendous weight of the pyramid. Then the area was surveyed so that the 4 sides of the pyramid would be perfectly oriented to the 4 points of the compass. To level the foundation, a gridwork of trenches was built. Water, flooded into the trenches, was used as a level. A string was stretched between 2 sticks of equal length, held touching the water. The ground was then leveled until measuring rods showed that the surface was parallel to the strings. Some of the limestone blocks were quarried at the building site. Others were cut from the banks of the Nile and floated to the site on barges. The stones were then pulled over wooden rollers to the site. As many as 200 men may have been harnessed to a single block, which could weigh more than 15,000 pounds. Huge ramps were built to serve as roadways for the massive blocks. Steeper ramps provided access to the mounting levels of stone. After the capstone had been placed on the final tier of stones, masons dressed the exterior with layers of fine white limestone, leaving a smooth, gleaming surface. Only a fragment of the limestone can still be seen at the summit of Khafra's pyramid. It was long believed that the pyramids were built by slaves. How else could sufficient labor have been marshaled for the prodigious task? But today, Egyptologists think that the workers were not slaves, but peasants, organized into teams or gangs. They would work in rotation for several months each year, throughout the decades needed to finish the project. They did so because the back-breaking toil was seen as an exalted calling, an opportunity to serve their kings who would become gods. 180 pyramids still stand in Egypt. All were built in less than 2 centuries. Then, construction abruptly and mysteriously ceased. Ironically, the pyramids failed in their primary function of protecting the pharaohs entombed within. Long ago, robbers broke through the seemingly impregnable masonry and emptied the sacred chambers of their treasures and sarcophagi. Even so, priests in the cult of Khufu were still officiating in the ruins of his temple 2,000 years after the pharaoh had been sealed in his awesome tomb. Thus, the ancient religion of Egypt persisted for at least as long as the world has known Christianity. And although the pyramids have been assaulted and plundered by emperors and sultans, as well as by common thieves, their power and mystery remain undiminished. The first and last great wonder of the ancient world. For more than 1,000 years, it was the world's greatest city, the largest, the richest, the most powerful. For more than 1,000 years, it was the heart of Christendom, the seat of an empire that stretched across much of Europe, the Near East, and North Africa. And when this capital of Christianity was conquered, it became the seat of another empire that would last for another 500 years. In this city, where East meets West, where the cultures of 3 continents have flourished, there is one monument that epitomizes the glory and conflict and history of 16 centuries. The city is Constantinople, today called Istanbul, in Turkey, and the monument is Hagia Sophia. Constantinople was founded in 660 BC as a Greek colony named Byzantium. In 330 AD, the Emperor Constantine renamed the city Constantinople and established it as the new capital of the Roman Empire. The first Roman emperor to embrace Christianity, Constantine decreed that his new faith would be the official state religion. And as the city of Rome receded into insignificance, Constantinople, strategically located at the crossroads of 3 continents, became the commercial, political, and religious center of the world. From this center, the Emperor Justinian, the grandson of Constantine, sought to restore the Roman Empire to its former glory. In his capital city, Constantinople, he built the largest man-made enclosure in the world, the Church of Divine Wisdom, Hagia Sophia. It was intended to be both a church and a symbol of imperial power. Justinian saw himself as God's vice-regent, with a divine mandate to propagate the true faith of Christianity. Hagia Sophia was to be the embodiment of heaven on earth. no expense was spared for the massive undertaking. A workforce of 10,000 men was assembled, including the finest architects, masons, stonecutters, and mosaic artists in the world. A massive dome was conceived, the largest of its kind ever built. This dramatic architectural achievement would not be surpassed until the building of Michelangelo's dome at St. Peter's in Rome, more than 1,000 years later. The interior walls and floors were paved with marble and other stones brought from all over the empire and beyond: Egypt, Libya, Greece, and Britain. Said the historian Procopius, "He who entered Hagia Sophia might imagine that he had come upon a meadow with its flowers in full bloom." Begun in 532 AD, the church was ready for dedication in less than 6 years. Upon entering his masterpiece, Justinian raised his hands to heaven and cried, "Glory be to God, who has thought me worthy to finish this work. Solomon, I have outdone thee." The interior of the great church was filled with light. Golden mosaics covered the ceiling, vaults, and arches. The dome itself was said to hover as if suspended by a chain from heaven. Hagia Sophia was the crowning achievement of Justinian's ambitious plan for Constantinople, but it was only one of many remarkable feats of engineering. Another was the massive wall that surrounded the city, a structure so imposing and heavily fortified that it was expected to last for all eternity. Indeed, the city's people believed that if the wall would ever be breached by a non-Christian foe, it would signal the apocalypse, the end of the world. The wall protected Constantinople for nearly 1,000 years. Then, in 1453, led by Sultan Muhammad II, thousands of Muslim warriors poured into the city, pillaging and plundering the heart of the Christian empire. One world came to an end, and another was born. Constantinople's citizens took refuge in Hagia Sophia, praying for deliverance. When the Sultan reached the magnificent church, he decreed that those inside would be allowed to go in peace, and that the greatest church of Christendom would become a mosque. Hagia Sophia, the only church in the city to be converted into a Muslim house of worship. A prayer niche was erected in place of the Christian altar, facing east toward the holy city of Mecca. Christian icons were replaced by Islamic symbols and texts. And because in Islam, the visual representation of all living things is held to be blasphemous, the magnificent Christian mosaics of Hagia Sophia were buried beneath a blanket of plaster. For nearly 5 centuries, Hagia Sophia remained an Islamic house of worship, and its priceless mosaics and other Christian works of art were nearly lost to memory. Then, in the mid-19th century, the reigning Sultan ordered a restoration of the mosque. It was his architect who uncovered the long-lost Christian imagery. When he showed his discovery to the Sultan lamented that Islamic law prohibited such imagery. In an enlightened stroke, he ordered the architect to recover the images in such a way that they could easily be uncovered again, if ever the appropriate time should come. Indeed, that time did come. In 1934, Kemal Atatürk, the father of modern Turkey, declared that this sacred site, which had served 2 great religions, should be preserved for all time as a museum. Today, Hagia Sophia, Church of Divine Wisdom, or Hagia Sophia, Pride of the Sultans, still looms over the great city, a magnificent reminder of the glories of not one, but of 2 great empires, and of the faith that inspired each. In the heart of Indonesia, on the island of Java, lies one of the most mysterious wonders in the world. It is neither a monument to the glory of kings, nor a temple where gods were once worshipped or appeased. There is no altar, no sanctuary, but there is wisdom and beauty, architectural genius and spiritual nourishment. It is Borobudur, a Buddhist shrine depicting the path to enlightenment, carved in a mountain of stone. Borobudur is in truth a gigantic book, carved in 3 dimensions, a book of stone pictures created for a people who could not read. The carvings, displayed in a series of ascending galleries, form a path to wisdom and enlightenment. And like the sacred texts of other faiths, Borobudur contains many chapters and stories full of mysteries and meaning, meditations and morals. The building of Borobudur, which took 70 years, started around 760 AD. The more than 1 million stones in the monument were quarried from the beds of the nearby Progo and Elo rivers. The stones were fitted together precisely, without the use of mortar, a feat of architecture and engineering not unlike the building of the Egyptian pyramids. Skilled craftsmen may have carved the stones with iron tools similar to those still used today. In truth, we know little of the lives of the people who created Borobudur, but a few hints come from the carved stones themselves. The people were apparently prosperous farmers. The fertile land, which has changed little through the centuries, provided them with a rich bounty. Less than 200 years after construction was completed, the civilization that built Borobudur vanished abruptly. Later records refer to some great calamity, perhaps an earthquake or massive volcanic eruption. The verdant jungle quickly reclaimed Borobudur, hiding its splendor for the next 1,000 years. It was rediscovered by a Dutch engineer in 1814. 200 men spent 6 weeks hacking away the growth that covered the mountain. When re-exposed to the elements, the sanctuary soon began to deteriorate. Several fruitless attempts were made to restore and protect it during the next 150 years. Finally, in 1973, the Indonesian government sponsored a successful restoration that took 10 years and cost $25 million, preserving Borobudur for generations to come. Today, Borobudur remains one of the most important Buddhist sites in all of Asia. Buddhism is the philosophy and way of life taught by Prince Gautama Siddhartha, born in India around 620 BC. He preached the cardinal virtues of morality, patience, industry, meditation, and wisdom in order to achieve enlightenment, and with enlightenment, freedom from suffering. Each year in June, thousands of Buddhists come here from all over Java and the surrounding islands to celebrate Waisak, a ceremony commemorating the birth and death of Buddha. On the night of the full moon, they join in the intonation of mass prayers. The architecture of Borobudur mirrors the Buddhist path to wisdom and enlightenment. From a distance, the profile of Borobudur looks like a monumental stupa, a holy burial vault containing the remains of one who has attained enlightenment. A stupa is a sacred shape in Buddhism, not unlike the cross in Christianity. Seen from above, Borobudur resembles ancient sacred patterns called mandalas. They were designed as objects of meditation, tools to reach enlightenment. Significantly, one cannot see the top of Borobudur from its base. just as one cannot perceive the end of a spiritual journey upon taking the first step. A pilgrim coming to Borobudur enters through the eastern door and begins reading or studying the carvings. The corridors of the monument are the path to enlightenment. Every wall is covered with complex carvings, each carving a page in a book of wisdom. The first book depicts worldly passions and desires. It is peopled by kings, princes, villains and demons, ogres and nymphs. The second book tells the story of the life of the Buddha. Each chapter in the Buddha's story has a moral. As the pilgrim walks these corridors, he learns to discern between good and evil. The third book is about the travels of Sudana, a young man in search of wisdom and enlightenment, perhaps a representative of all pilgrims who would know the way of the Buddha. The Buddha figures ensconced on the balustrades are like the teachers sought out by Sudana. Peaceful, contemplative, with only subtle changes in their hand gestures to differentiate them. The Buddhas embody the elusive, inner-directed focus that is central to Buddhist philosophy. When the pilgrim has absorbed the teaching and wisdom of Borobudur, he passes through the final gate, moving from the confining corridors of the galleries into an open space at the top of the sacred mountain, as though leaving a world of limitations and entering one of infinite possibilities. Subtle, profound, and provocative both in its multiple meanings and in its simplicity, Borobudur speaks to us from the silent depths of time. For both the devout and the curious, this is undeniably a spiritual place, a place of wisdom and mystery, a place to contemplate the universe that exists within each human being. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. That church is the Catholic Church, and this is one of its most hallowed sites, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Constructed over the tomb of St. Peter, it is the greatest church in Catholic Christendom. The story of St. Peter's begins with a simple fisherman in the Sea of Galilee. Called by Christ to be his follower, Peter's original name was Simon, but Christ renamed him Petros, or Peter, which in Greek means rock. He left all that he knew, home, family, and safety, to follow Jesus. And though he would doubt his own faith, though he would fail Jesus and even deny him, Christ would choose him above all others as the rock upon which to build his church. In Peter's story lie the basic messages of Christian belief. The power of faith, the gift of forgiveness, and the promise of everlasting life. Like Jesus, Peter was persecuted, imprisoned, and crucified. In the Roman arena of the Emperor Nero, in a final act of humility to Christ, Peter asked that he be placed upside down upon the cross. Tradition holds that Peter was buried in a cemetery on a hill nearby. Here his followers erected a small shrine where for 250 years early Christians came to worship. In the 4th century AD, Constantine, the first Christian emperor of Rome, erected a church over the burial site. It stood for 12 centuries. Then, early in the 16th century, Pope Julius II decided to build a new church and tore down Constantine's Basilica. But more than a century would pass before the enormous church would be completed. 18 popes would reign during the period of the Basilica's construction. Many of the greatest artists and architects of the Renaissance would participate in the massive undertaking. It is Michelangelo, together with the sculptor Bernini, whose work is most closely associated with St. Peter's. When he was only 25, Michelangelo completed what many consider to be the first masterpiece of his long career, the magnificent Pietà, the only work Michelangelo ever signed. Then, at the age of 72, near the end of his life, Michelangelo returned to St. Peter's as its most important architect. His final masterpiece would be the Great Dome, a double-shelled design that was the most daring of its kind ever attempted. St. Peter's Basilica was consecrated in 1626, 120 years after the first designs had been submitted. Shortly thereafter, Bernini began the addition of the massive elliptical piazza, or square, in front of the church. Bernini's design framed the square with immense quadruple colonnades, forming two arms that seem to embrace all who enter the square. In the center of the square stands the great Egyptian obelisk of Heliopolis, brought to Rome in 37 AD. The obelisk once stood in Nero's arena, and it is believed that St. Peter was crucified in its shadow. To enter St. Peter's Basilica is to enter one of the most awe-inspiring places in the Western world. The sheer size of the interior space is breathtaking. The church is filled with light that shines on a magnificent collection of statuary, altars, frescoes, and paintings. None is more magnificent than Bernini's Cathedra Petri, the throne of St. Peter in glory. Placed at the rear of the apse, the cathedra is actually a reliquary, a protective covering of bronze and gold. Inside is a wooden chair once believed to have belonged to St. Peter. Bernini enclosed the chair in a new throne, surrounded by sculpted clouds, light rays, and angels. The Cathedra Petri is beautifully framed by the superb baldacchino, or canopy. It covers the high altar where only the Pope may say the Mass. Soaring to the height of an 8-story building, the canopy is crafted out of 90 tons of bronze. Bernini's baldacchino stands directly below Michelangelo's magnificent dome. More than 400 feet high and nearly 140 feet in diameter, the dome is one of the largest structures of its kind in the world. The sun streams through its windows and fills the church below with what can only be described as a holy light. And directly beneath the soaring dome and the great altar is one of the holiest of all Catholic shrines. Here, according to tradition, lies the original grave of St. Peter.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
There is no better time to witness the grandeur of St. Peter's than at a Mass celebrated by the Pope. Each Pope serves in a line of papal succession that can be traced back to St. Peter himself. The Pope is both the Bishop of Rome and the foremost teacher of the faith. For Catholics, he is the final human intercessor between man and God. For 1/5 of the world's population, St. Peter's is much more than a building, however magnificent it may be. St. Peter's touches the spiritual heart of Catholicism, a monument to a simple fisherman whose extraordinary faith changed the world. He was Simon Peter, and for nearly 2,000 years, his followers have come to worship upon this rock. Alleluia, Alleluia. On the banks of the river Yamuna in northern India lies another wonder. To the poet Rabindranath Tagore, this wonder appeared as a heavenly vision. He wrote, "Though emeralds, rubies, pearls must pass away, yet one solitary tear would hang on the cheek of time in the form of this, Taj Mahal." It is not a church or a palace. Rather, it is a testament to one man's love for a woman. It is a tomb built by a king for his beloved queen. The king was Shah Jahan, the fifth in a line of 6 great Mughal emperors who ruled much of the Indian subcontinent for more than 3 centuries. Between 1526 and 1857, the Mughals built an empire that rivaled the kingdoms of Europe in size and wealth. Shah Jahan ascended to the throne in 1628, having executed 5 rivals for power to assure his succession. Though the struggle for power was brutal, Shah Jahan was a cultivated man with an appreciation for art and architecture. He supervised the building of palaces and entire cities throughout his empire. But his finest achievement was unquestionably the Taj Mahal. Shah Jahan ruled from the Red Fort at Agra, just a few miles from the site where he would later create his masterpiece. Here, within the royal palace, musicians played continuously in every chamber, lest the emperor should happen to pass by. In the royal harem, 1,000 slaves and concubines were kept in lavish splendor. Shah Jahan took 3 wives, but he was most devoted to Arjuman Banu, to whom he gave the title Mumtaz Mahal, chosen one of the palace. Legend has it that the couple first met by chance on Contrary Day, a day when the ladies of the court were allowed to remove their veils and trade at the royal bazaar. Though it was love at first sight, the two were forbidden to marry or even to see each other for 5 years, as astrologers waited for the most auspicious day for their wedding. Very little is known about Mumtaz Mahal, but it is said that she gave generously to the poor and that she was her husband's trusted advisor. The royal couple were so devoted to each other that Mumtaz often accompanied her husband when he went to war. It was during just such a military campaign that Mumtaz died after giving birth to their 14th child in 19 years. As Mumtaz lay dying, she asked Jahan to build for her a monument of such perfection that no one who saw it could doubt the power of their love. After his wife's death, the grief-stricken Shah Jahan locked himself in a room for 8 days. When he emerged, it was said that he had actually grown smaller. He was bent over like an old man. His hair had turned white. Shah Jahan spent 22 years fulfilling his wife's last wish. 20,000 laborers worked day and night to complete the Taj. Artisans and craftsmen were summoned from all over the empire. Their descendants still practice their crafts in the back streets of Agra. Strangely, the identity of the architect of the Taj Mahal remains a mystery, though some believe that Shah Jahan himself played the most important role in the design. The Taj Mahal is approached through the noisy, dusty streets of Agra, a scene that has changed little through the centuries. But upon entering the grounds of the Taj, one encounters a world apart. The red gate at the main entrance is 100 feet high, and its door is crafted from 8 different kinds of metal. Inside the red gate lies an oasis in the desert, the gardens of the Taj. The garden motif is continued in the great main arch of the Taj. For in a world of heat and dust, flowers and cool running water offer the promise of paradise. Inside, Mumtaz Mahal lies buried in a crypt beneath this marble cenotaph. While Shah Jahan lived, holy men kept vigil over Mumtaz's tomb, and sacred music was played at all times. When Shah Jahan died in 1666, he was laid to rest beside his beloved wife. Mumtaz Mahal was granted her dying wish. Few who gaze upon this splendor could doubt the love of Shah Jahan for his wife, for he created a monument to that love that has been called the most beautiful building in the world. The human need to explain the mysteries of life has found expression in monuments of astonishing beauty and power. Together, these sacred places form a portrait of humanity through the ages. And though the beliefs and cultures that inspired these monuments are diverse, a common thread connects them. Each reflects a faith in the human capacity to reach beyond this mortal plane, to touch the infinite, and to express that which is divine within all human experience.
following promotional message appears in consideration for services rendered during production of this video.
If you're looking for an airline that flies to the great wonders of the world, you could say we have it covered, because Lufthansa flies to 180 cities in 82 countries around the world. Lufthansa, worldwide and worldwise.